Welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at GodsFiveMinutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. One of the sacrifices commanded by God in the Old Testament was a sacrifice of thanksgiving. That command was underlined with these words from the 50th Psalm: "Offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows unto the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me." Salvation cannot be bought by money. It's good, not everybody's got some. And God is a lover of the poor as well as the rich. And neither can good works guarantee our entrance into heaven, for good works can be performed by a selfish heart. Instead, let us offer God thanksgiving. Let's not look at sacrifices as in themselves gifts pleasing to God, but present them as attributes of your gratitude. Then He'll accept them, but not if our souls have no love and no thankfulness to offer. The sacrifices, as considered in themselves, are condemned, but the heart emotions of love caused by remembering divine goodness are commanded as the substance, meaning, and soul of sacrifice. Even when the legal ceremonials were not abolished, this was true, and when they came to an end, this truth was more than ever made manifest. It wasn't for want of bullocks on the altar that Israel was blamed, but for want of thankful adoration before the Lord. She excelled in the visible, but in the inward grace, which is the one thing needful, she sadly failed. Too many in these days are in the same condemnation. Perhaps the greatest part of Thanksgiving sacrifice, certainly coupled with it, is the command, "Pay thy vows unto the Most High." Let the sacrifice be really presented to the God who sees the heart. Pay to Him the love you promised, the service you covenanted to render. The loyalty of heart you vowed to maintain is common and deadly for souls in some hour of desperate need to try to bargain with the Lord for deliverance and mercy, only to forget the covenant as soon as the danger is past. Those who live in this manner have the promise, "And call upon me in the day of trouble." Notice how this promise is linked to the thanksgiving sacrifice. Is it an offering to ask help of heaven? It is even so. The King Himself so regards it. For herein is faith manifested, herein is love proved, for if in the hour of peril we fly to those we love. It seems an obvious thing to pray to God when we are distressed. Yet is it a more acceptable worship than the mere heartless presentation of bullocks and goats or forms and rituals? This is a voice from the throne, and how full of mercy it is. It is very tempestuous round about Jehovah, and yet what soft drops of mercy's rain fall from the bosom of the storm. Who wouldn't offer such sacrifices? Troubled one, haste to present it now. Who shall say that Old Testament saints did not know the gospel? Its very spirit and essence breathes like frankincense all around this holy psalm. "I will deliver thee. The reality of thy sacrifice of prayer shall be seen in its answer." Whether the smoke of burning bulls be sweet to God or not, certainly your humble prayer shall be, and He will prove it so by His gracious reply to your supplication. This promise is very large and may refer both to temporal and eternal deliverances. Faith can turn it every way, like the sword of the cherubim. "And thou shalt glorify me," He said. Thy prayer will glorify Him, and your grateful perception of His answering mercy will also glorify Him. The goats and bullocks would prove a failure, but the true sacrifice never could. The calves of the stall might be a vain oblation, but not the calves of sincere lips. Thus we see what is true ritual. Here we read inspired rubrics. Spiritual worship is the great, the essential matter. All else without it is rather provoking than pleasing to God. As helps to the soul, outward offerings were precious, but when men went not beyond them, even their hallowed things were profaned in the view of heaven. "Call upon me," He said. Prayers like the king which Queen Elizabeth gave the Earl of Essex, bidding him, if he were ever in any distress, send that ring to her, and she would help him. God tells His people, if they be in any perplexity, to send this ring to Him. "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee. Thou shalt glorify me." Have you talked to Him today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at GodsFiveMinutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.
The The world is in chaos. You're here for a purpose. What does the Bible have to say about it all? I'm Mark Taylor, host of Crosspoint podcast and radio show, and I'd like to invite you to join me each week as I navigate the complexities of faith, culture, and personal growth. Each week, I interview a different guest who is making an impact on the culture for God's kingdom. Whether you're seeking spiritual guidance, true information, or a fresh perspective, this podcast equips you to discern truth in today's chaotic world. When Christianity intersects with everyday life, that's where you'll find Crosspoint, sometimes discussing the issues that some churches don't want to talk about. Look up Crosspoint with Mark Taylor wherever you get your podcast, produced by KNEO Radio and the Sky High Podcast Network.